Expanding Consciousness with your host, myself, Anjula, and I am very honored to be here today with Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who is a renowned author and researcher in topics related to spirituality and the paranormal. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you, Anjula. Such a treat to be with you today.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be sharing this time and space with you. Could you just begin with sharing with our audience a little bit about your background and how you actually got into doing this work in spirituality and the paranormal?
Like many people who are drawn to these topics, I had childhood experiences. And most children do. They have some sort of psychic experience, encounters with spirits. And then this fades away as a person gets older. But for me, perhaps because psychic ability runs in my family, they never really went away. And when I was little, I thought everybody had experiences with spirits and angels and fairies. And it was amazing to me that not everybody does, and that not everybody believed in them. So it really made me wonder why it's such an uneven playing field. I'm a voracious reader. I always have been since I was a kid. And so I wanted to know as much as I could about all of these things. And that propelled a lot of personal study that then became my profession. Now, I've always been a writer. In fact, I like to joke that I came out of the womb writing. And writing has been my passion throughout my life. And I really wanted to be a novelist. That was my goal, was to be a novelist and write about paranormal themes and the supernatural and fantasy, science fiction, all those interesting genres. But my journalistic bent, and I did work as a journalist, my journalistic bent made me very curious to know the facts. I wanted to know how everything tied together. So the two merged in a very happy way, and my personal pursuits became my professional pursuits, and vice versa. So I've been living really a wonderful life of discovery, a study, a deepening connection to the divine through all of the topics that I have explored. And I've been able to put that out in talks and books and other formats as a way of helping others understand their own experiences and their connections to the cosmos and all of creation.
Well, thank you for doing that, because we're glad you did. We have just 3 of your books here, but I know you have a ton of books, and we will go over that a little bit later. But you did actually touch on like the different types, and I want to say entities as a word to kind of cover all non-physical 3D human beings at the moment. So I know there's different types of entities. You can have fairies, elementals, you can have jinns, shadows, extraterrestrials are considered entities. So all these different types, but there's so many out there. Is there a way that you can kind of give us an overview of how they're connected, or how we can kind of like, just for more of a beginner's mind, just kind of have an idea of who falls in what place?
Well, it's clear through studying the literature and anecdotal experience that human beings have had contact experiences throughout our entire history. And some of them have been benevolent and benign, and others have been very troubling and interfering. So we have 2 broad categories of entity intermingling and involvement. And we put many, many labels on those beings on both sides of the fence. But it's a very blurry landscape, and when you start studying the traits and characteristics of different kinds of entities and how people have interacted with them, you begin to wonder, as I did, are we really talking about a handful of entities rather than hundreds and hundreds? Because of the way they have engaged with human beings. So sometimes I think we're dealing with 1 or 2 types of entities, good or bad, and we've just put different labels on them. For example, I've studied the fairies and interfering beings like the demons and many kinds of demons, and also the djinn. Weren't very well known in Western culture, but elsewhere around the world quite well known. They behave a lot like we would consider demons to behave. And yet when you compare them all, it's like you're talking about the same entity, you've just given a different label to it. So where all this fits together and where the Oz is behind the curtain remains a mystery. But the thing is that people want definition. And they want to know that supernaturally, this is an apple, this is an orange,
Yeah.
this is a demon, this is a fairy, this is an ET. We have dozens of ETs, you know, they want all the fine little lines and boundaries drawn. But yet when you look at people's experiences, they all blend together, and it becomes very difficult. If you strip out the name that somebody gives an entity that they've had contact with, if you take away the name and ask another person to identify the entity, you get all kinds of answers. So it's a matter of subjective interpretation.
And then I believe there's also a lot of shape-shifting going on in that
There
world
is.
as well. So it could be one day something looks like a shadow, but then it looks like a djinn to somebody else. And it might intentionally be kind of tricking you as well. So would it be fair to say that a good way to kind of understand it, even though it's very like a slippery type of area, is that it does fall into kind of two major categories of light and dark?
It's helping and benign and benevolent, and interfering and harmful and negative. Those basically are the two broad categories. I did an informal study some years ago comparing ETs to angels. And I took some experiencer accounts, and I took out the word ET and the word angel and just substituted entity, and then submitted these stories to a pool of people to, can you tell what this entity is? And the answers were all over the place. And so the next question would be, why did you identify this being as such and such? And it's really our subjective point of view. We have to fit these experiences into something that makes sense for us. So the bottom line may not be the individual label, but how we are interacting with positive and negative forces in the cosmos. And of course, anything that's harmful is negative. It really doesn't matter what we call it. If it is disrupting life and creating a lot of damage, not only to the individual, but to the collective of humanity. And there are forces at work like that. On the other hand, there are forces at work who are pulling in the good energy, the healing energy, the energy that helps to connect us to the divine and enables us to become something greater than we thought we could ever become. And those forces are at work too.
Now, is it possible, I'm wondering, to actually open yourself up to that dimension, to the paranormal spirit entity type of world, and only open yourself up to the light side, or are you inevitably opening yourself up to the light and dark, because an opening is an opening? How does that work?
You're quite right that an opening is an opening, and anytime we knock on the door of the spirit world, and that includes the entities as well, anything is possible. It is a good idea to be focused toward the highest possible path you can be on, and the highest light that you can bring in, because that will screen out a lot. There are a lot of entities out there that are opportunists, and I call them drive-by demons. They're just out there cruising around looking, you know, for a light around a person that gives them a way in. And they're going to have fun with you. Maybe they're a trickster. Maybe they want to take advantage of you. Maybe they want to harm you in some way. But if you've got the right consciousness set, the right orientation, a lot of those things are going to be screened out. Then you get to another level, and this is a part of esoteric training as well, that the brighter your light, the more you are going to attract certain kinds of negative entities who will want to dim your light. So as a person becomes more serious as a spiritual student, there are these challenges that come from the spirit world, and often the spirit world will act, they'll winnow in and act through human beings who will personify these forces that are very destructive. It is said that the three biggest tests are sex, money, and power, and that all of those issues are going to arise at some point in your life the deeper you go into your spiritual study. So it's important to orient yourself to the light, to everything that is helpful, benevolent, embodies love. That is the dominant, unconditional love is the dominant energy that holds everything together in creation. And the more we can orient ourselves to that light, the stronger we're going to be, and just naturally deflect a lot of this negative stuff. But here's the thing about negativity, that many people, when they throw open the door to the spirit world, they give their power over to it. They consider it to be more powerful than them. Everything on that side has more power. And so whatever answers they're likely to not turn it away because it's a more authoritative presence, and so they have to allow it. And that's not so. Negative beings who come into someone's presence and create a lot of disturbance. You're in control. You have the right, the free will, and the sovereignty to maintain your boundaries in terms of anything else that wants to interact with you. And we should push out the negativity, and we can. For some people, it becomes rather hard because they might not have good natural defenses, or they've allowed something to really take a hold of them. But we can shut the door. We can say, no, you are not welcome here. Go back to where you came from, and I'm only allowing a certain level of presence of beings and consciousnesses into my field of awareness.
So that's very much owning your power, and I think I've actually heard you mention before as well in a past interview is something about, we unconsciously allow spirit world to do so much type of thing. Could you just discuss a little bit about when we making room for them in our lives on an unconscious level? Like, what does that look like? So maybe if people are doing it in the audience can kind of be like, oh wait, hold on, maybe I should maybe do a prayer or something before I do that, So what is it to actually unconsciously be inviting them in? What does that look like?
Most people in, especially Western culture, are unaware of the profound influences of spirit around us all the time. And even though it's not dramatic, it's not Hollywood dramatic, it's operating in the background. So we have influences on the way we think, on our desires and goals, our weaknesses. This is why all spiritual traditions address following a path of virtue. They all address this by different names and in certain ways, to follow. You have the vices and the virtues, and to follow the path of virtue, which is going to keep you in alignment with all of the benevolent, high-level spiritual presences and beings who can bring tremendous positive energy into your life and into the planet. But if we are tempted through weakness to corruption, to lie, to take advantage of others, we have a greed for power, we overindulge in sex for the sake of sex rather than as a sacrament of love, then these are negative ways for spirits to amplify weaknesses for corruption. And so people can be influenced on a daily basis through how we think. Spirits can track our thoughts, and they are attracted to our thoughts. They are part of our energy field. And so those opportunistic ones who are looking for easy marks to manipulate, it's much easier to manipulate people who are vulnerable to giving into their weaknesses. So we're constantly challenged, but in good ways, to embody the best possible qualities we can. None of us are perfect. That's why we're here on the planet. We are helping to heal our imperfections and to bring better qualities into consciousness and into the body. So we're all going to make mistakes and have our setbacks. But the important thing is that we recognize that and we keep turning things around to put our consciousness on as high a level as we can.
Yeah. I do believe hugely in free will, but I think with free will comes responsibility as well. So for those people who do choose to communicate with spirits or feel it's their path for whatever reason, are there some pointers on the ways that they can do it responsibly, and also not just responsibly, but also still be present in the physical world here in the 3D dimension? Because you don't want to just lock yourself away and just be hanging out with spirits all the time. I mean, I don't know if that's your path, but it might be you may also have work to do here in the physical realm. So could you talk a bit about responsibility if you do choose to engage in communication?
Yes, I can. And you brought up a very good point about we have work to do in the physical. And we're here to bring certain spiritual energies into manifestation. So that requires us to be very anchored and grounded in the physical plane, even when we're doing high-level spiritual work. It is important to be grounded, and So in my teachings, I've always emphasized that before you do some serious work on the path, make sure you are well grounded and you have a connection to your spiritual source, whatever that is. God, Goddess, the gods, the nature world, the saints, the angels, wherever you feel your spiritual point of gravity is, your connection to everything that is in the divine. That is your foundation to work from, and it will expand. I mean, the more you do your spiritual work, that's going to expand. But prayer and meditation, daily practice of prayer and meditation are the best ways to protect yourself in your work, to expand your work and elevate your consciousness. Even in my work with paranormal groups, and I do a lot of paranormal investigation, and I work with a lot of paranormal groups, and I'm often asked, how do I protect myself when I go into a very haunted location or a place where there's bad energy and even negative spirits who've been harassing victims? My answer is that my protection is always in place because of my practice of daily prayer and meditation. It's like going to the spiritual gym, and what that does is it builds up the aura around you, and that's your buffer. That's one of your lines of defenses against interference from unwanted entities, is the energy field of consciousness that we embody through the mental plane, the emotional body, the physical body, and the etheric body. So it's very important to do that, even if it's just for a few minutes a day. Then there's no harm in reinforcing yourself, and I do it too, that before I undertake serious spiritual work, I always pray. And if I'm at home, I have an altar at home, and my altar contains objects from different religious paths and things that have personal significance to me. And I go to the altar and I make a little prayer for the work at hand. And if I'm on location, same thing. But it reinforces what's already in place, where some people, I think, have not a good orientation to this, is they think that, well, it's just a matter of flipping a switch. And so you go out and you decide you're going to contact the spirits, or you go out to a location to do an investigation. And if you say this prayer, you carry this crystal, or this saint medallion, you're going to be automatically protected. Well, you might as well take a grocery list with you, because you're not connected to anything. You have to be connected. And yes, prayers are very useful. There are certain prayers that are favored by people, but you have to feel an emotional connection deep in your heart in it for the energy to become energized in your field of consciousness.
So it's very much consciously aligning rather than just kind of skipping along and thinking, oh, well, it's fine, I'll be okay, And just, speaking about our God-given power and authority, like, when I've encountered things, let's just say entities from spirit world, before it used to throw me off a lot. And then, I believe in many paths, and Christ is a major one for me. And I realized that we have the power as children of God, like we're directly connected to Source. So as with the human plane, physical plane, and many, many dimensions, there is the play out of light and dark. And I think it's, for me, it's worked better to kind of send it love, whether it's light or dark, and to transcend it and call on the Source that was before duality even came into place. So is that what you're referring to in a way when you're talking about, getting your energy and aligning with Source? Is that am I right on the right track with you here, or is that something different in the sense of tapping into that which has dominion, I guess, over all duality forms?
Well, anytime you connect with beings of light and love, it brings a very powerful energy into your consciousness that can be used to transform the shadow side. And actually the dark entities have a role to play because they force us to confront our fears and to heal the dark side. Everyone comes into incarnation with the shadow side to work on. And for some people it's going to be through issues with people or things about themselves. For others it's going to be more of a confrontation with the spiritual realms. And either way, spiritual presences are at play. So they do have a role to play, but then we have a role to play with them too, which is to heal the darkness. And there are times, however, when it should be repelled because it is so insidious and so dangerous to a person that it must be repelled and sent back to where it came from.
That's interesting. I just recently, I don't know what I was reading or watching, but it really resonated with me, so I've been using that where I call on my guides or whatever that, you know, if I do encounter any darker, lower vibrations, that if it belongs to me and it's my own shadow, let me redeem it. And if it doesn't, please take it back to wherever it came from. So it's kind of like trying to cover both bases, because I do believe in doing shadow work. And there's the individual shadow, there's the collective shadow. So it kind of, you know, it kind of becomes like a slippery slope of where to begin, where to stop type of thing on doing the shadow work and working with, because there could be like a collective consciousness that has caused like a very heavy dark shadow, and you're just sitting there thinking it's your own personal shadow and trying to work with it. It might be a little bit of a job on hand, you know. So it's balancing it out. So just as I said, I just started doing that. Would you recommend that to people to kind of discern between the two, of whether they should be trying to work with that shadow or if they should just be repelling the shadow? Because how would you know the difference? Because they're quite tricky as well.
Well, the shadow side that really needs to be healed is within. And when that's healed within, then the dark entities have nothing to latch onto. And that is a healing energy that then goes out into the dark side. But it is good to have discernment and to have some sort of sense of what you're dealing with. And this discernment comes through spiritual study, it comes through prayer and meditation and practice that begins to operate in the background of consciousness, so that you know whether something is, for example, masquerading or a trickster kind of presence, starting out as Mr. Nice Guy, or it's really a benevolent presence. But when people become under assault by dark force entities, the first thing that needs to be done is to find the weaknesses in the energy field where those beings are able to attach and to heal those repairs. But that's just the superficial side of it. The deeper healing, if those presences are really going to be kept out, has to come from within. So the person who's involved has to be able to heal within and to fortify the inner resources to push consciousness, free will, and determination and sovereignty out from themselves, so that it's like a barrier, so that these entities cannot get back in. One of the things that we see often in dealing with negative entities that attach to people is that the entities can be sent away, and then if the cause for why they got there is not addressed and healed, they come back, or something like them comes in. And this is one reason why a lot of exorcisms really fail, because they're only addressing the superficial aspect of it rather than the holistic aspect of it. So it can often become a very long and complicated process when someone has had something deeply entwined in their life and energy field. Sadly, I'm seeing more cases like this, because I think we live in a culture that is becoming increasingly detached from the spiritual connection. We have addictions of all sorts, to the wrong foods, to toxic chemicals, to media. Technology is wonderful, but it disconnects us from people and from the very place that we're living, the very physical reality where we're living.
Now, we did mention, if you do want to communicate with spirits, how do we do this consciously and responsibly? Now, is it possible that if you don't want to, that you can shut yourself off from communications? I mean, is that possible? But then I'm thinking, if it is, it's probably because it's a scary experience that you should do work on on your inner self, but at the same time, if people just don't want to deal with that word, is there a way to protect themselves so that they don't have to encounter a spirit world? Is that possible to even draw the line between the two?
It is possible, and there are people who their experiences, I wouldn't describe them as negative, like coming from the dark side, but they're upsetting to the person because it just disrupts their worldview. They don't know how to deal with it. They're not ready to deal with it, and so there are ways to turn it off. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort to do so. But that can be accomplished through prayer and meditation as well, and to visualize the boundary completely sealing off the person so that nothing comes through, that nothing is welcome. And I have known people who've been able to do that. Now, people who have a lot of mediumistic ability, that's quite natural. There are people who are gifted mediums, they're that way from childhood, and they often find a lot of intrusion. And it's not that they don't want to help, but it's they have a hard time turning it off. And the most common experience is that when they go to sleep and they start to get into that altered state, that's when the spirits come, because they know they can talk. And it's like, please, I got to get some sleep here. It's like, I don't have office hours right now. So what they have to learn is a control mechanism. So it's not intrusive, because if it is, it's very draining on your energy. So prayer, meditation. Also, if you can find some courses to take, and every community has them, in psychic skill development and psychic protection too. They all teach different techniques of visualization, of even sound, posture, use of symbols that can help an individual establish their boundaries so that they can open the door when they want to the place they want and be able to keep the rest of it out. Because we are here in physical bodies, we have things to do in the physical world. We're bringing spiritual energy in, so we have to have some sort of connection to the spiritual world. But discernment is a big part of it.
Now, okay, so we're here in physical bodies, and one of the things that, there's just so many things I want to ask in such limited time, but one of the things I was wondering about is the afterlife. Now, when I've had recent deaths, I know a lot of friends of mine have had people pass away, and I've noticed that some of us yearn to connect with them again in some form or another, and some of us kind of are just like, well, they've gone back to the light and let them be there. So I'm kind of wondering, what's your perspective on what happens when somebody physically leaves the body?
My view of the afterlife, and I've made quite a study of the afterlife and afterlife communications for years, is that it is a very fluid place, and that our concepts of a concrete heaven and a concrete hell are not quite accurate. One of the things that the dead talk about is that there's no big judgment. There's not God sitting somewhere passing judgment on a soul and consigning them to one place or the other. In fact, the judgment usually comes from the individual, assisted with spiritual beings. And there is a life review and an assessment. In terms of the actual afterlife, in occult terms, occult philosophy terms, is part of the astral plane, which is very fluid and it molds itself to thought. So people initially find themselves in a place of transition that pretty much corresponds to their expectations from their cultural conditioning. And then as they become adjusted to it, then they start moving into these other realities where they learn how to move in a different kind of body. There's instant transport of location. As soon as you think something and you'd like to be there, you can be there. Communication is telepathic. There's a transparency of intention. So you learn very quickly. We are told that what you think, others know, because there. It's there in your energy field. So people do different things in the afterlife, just like they do here. There are reunions with family and friends and pets and animals. There are activities. People can go into rest periods, study. We have opportunities opportunities to decide what we're going to do in our next incarnation, and I firmly believe in reincarnation. And that is very supported in the afterlife. Now, there are some communications where the people who, like through near-death experience, where they've glimpsed the afterlife, and so they've seen this like transition area, and it conforms to their religious views. So they come back and they say, well, yes, everything I ever learned in church, that's what I saw when I got to the edge of the afterlife. And it's true. Why wouldn't you? But there's something else beyond that as well. So it seems to be a place of great healing for individuals who have committed atrocities, who have done great damage in the physical plane, and have been ruled by dark forces. These individuals go into a different area. It's described as a lower vibration area, but it's for rehabilitation. But nobody can do the rehabilitation for them themselves. They have to want to do that. And they do have the opportunity to come back. And sometimes they come back in order to wreak more havoc. And this process goes on until they figure out it's better to be oriented toward the light, because they have tremendous suffering as well. There is always compensation for your actions.
So this is good information to remember. So we have, we actually, when we leave the physical plane, we're taking our level of consciousness with us.
We do.
So that's, you're not, we're not just leaving the body and, oh, like everything goes to fairy dust and we start all over again. Then
you're not going
continuation.
You're not going to be an instant saint.
Yeah.
You're not going to know everything. We've throughout history, we've had this tendency to think that the dead know everything because they're in some other realm with the gods. And even in ancient times, the dead were often consulted for prophecy because they should know things. They should know the future. And they should know all the answers to our cosmic questions. And they don't. Some of them don't know much more than they did when they were living, but they're learning too.
Yeah. And on the flip side of it, I guess it's nice to know when you do have loved ones depart and you know that they lived more of a virtuous life and lived more in love and light and a higher vibration, that has also gone with them, in the sense that, that level of consciousness, that level of enlightenment, they're still experiencing, and maybe to more of an higher level almost, in a different type of way. So it goes both ways. So if you've committed atrocities, then you might go in a slightly heavier place, but it's not a judgmental type of thing. But if you've also lived a good life and you've done well, then you go to a slightly more comfortable, no, I don't want to say comfortable, but nicer place,
I've studied a lot of the literature on afterlife communications, and I've had afterlife communications myself. Many of the dead talk about these different levels, that it's like a vibration of energy. And so what you have embodied in your physical life, you do take into the afterlife, and then you have a chance to advance from there. But they talk about levels that they don't have access to. Well, I can't go there yet because I haven't raised my vibration enough. The beings who are in those levels can come down to my level, but I can't go up to theirs. But I have the chance to get there. And so there's a lot of work to be done in the afterlife, and then we do a lot of it through incarnation as well.
And in that sense also, while we're on this physical plane, use that opportunity to raise our vibration and do good work, which just put us in at a slightly higher level, I guess.
It does, yes. Because everything that we can do to raise our spiritual consciousness and embody the virtues, embody love, embody healing, embody creativity, embody even this connection to everything that is, it takes our energy up to another level. And that's how the soul advances through all of these experiences.
Now, also, one other topic that I definitely wanted to get covered with you, because I know you've done extensive work on it and you actually have a book specifically dedicated to it, is the djinn. Could you talk a little bit about your findings around the djinn and just what's going on over there?
I became interested in the djinn through connecting with people who are having troubling experiences. And being a journalist, I get curious about things, and so I follow leads and see where the research takes me. And And a little over 10 years ago, I started getting a lot of inquiries from people about dark bedroom visitors. And the descriptions were all very similar. The invader looked like a silhouette of a very tall man wearing a cape or a coat and often a hat, with no features but seeming to be very solid. And this figure would come into the bedroom, stand by the bed, sometimes just watch, occasionally attack, but usually they watch. But they throw off this intensely negative energy that people have equated with demonic, with malevolent. And so the question is, what is this, and why did it come? And for some people, there were frequent visits, and very scary, terrifying experiences. So I started researching that because I wanted to know, what are these beings? Are they demons? They didn't seem like ghosts, they didn't seem like ETs, not something we would associate with fairies, for example. So what are they? And the long and the short of it was, that path led me to the djinn. Now, the djinn, I was familiar with them through my study of mythologies and demonologies and the magical tradition. And what we know about them comes primarily out of the Middle East, but that doesn't mean they're just Middle Eastern entities. They're very prominent in early Arabian folklore and mythology. They were absorbed into Islam, but they also were absorbed into the demonologies of the Babylonians, the Hebrews, the Chaldeans, that whole cradle of civilization in the Middle East. And of course, all of those entities then got absorbed in Christianity and in turn absorbed into Islam, all of this from a religious perspective. And they're interfering entities. They are pretty much the equivalent of what we would call the demonic. However, they have more dimension than that. They are supernatural entities. According to all the stories about them, they had dominion on the planet, and they lost that to us. Very similar to the origins of the fairies. And this has caused them to retreat into, in modern terms, what would be a parallel dimension. So they share the earth with us. And centuries ago, this way of retreating from our dimension was described as going underground, going into caves, living, well below the surface of the earth. But it's really another dimension. And so they're right here on the planet. They share the planet with us, but they are in a different dimensional vibratory rate. They do seem to have an awful lot of supernatural abilities that we don't have. They have the ability to come into our world, and we don't have the same two-way access. Many of them are interfering.
Yeah, and it sounds like they don't probably like us very much.
Well, a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
And they are, however, like human beings. No human being is either all good or all bad. It's a mix. There are some people, we've got the terrorists, we've got the charity workers, And it's the same thing in the djinn. They have benevolent and benign and enlightened members of their race. And then they have the bullies, the thugs, the con artists, the terrorists, the criminals, just like we do. And we get a very skewed end of interaction with them because the ones who are more enlightened don't have much interest in us, and so they don't interact with us. We're kind of like a lower intelligence to them. And the hostile ones see us as a playground, as a feeding ground, as the opportunity to maybe take back what they thought they lost, or have some other purpose. And so our experiences with them are skewed very heavily toward the negative.
In your experience, do you think that it is because they like the life force energy that we carry? Or is it kind of like an agenda because they want planet Earth back, or maybe a mix?
I think it's a mix. Okay. There's ample evidence from the way they interact with us. They don't sit down for an interview, unfortunately. That they can vampirize the life force off people. And when they come in shadow person form, and I think that shadow people are a form taken by djinn.
And then the nighttime bedroom visitors.
The nighttime visitors, they scare people by startling them. They evoke tremendous fear, and that is an adrenal energy that kicks back to them. So it's a vampirization of our life force. They're heavily involved in the ET abduction scenario. They're not the only players on the field, but they're very good shapeshifters, and they slide around in the background, and that's a very vampiric kind of activity too, because people are terrorized. They have their sexual genetic material taken from them. They're manipulated in many ways, and that is another way that people are vampirized. So the jinn participate in that as well. Now, I've interviewed many jinn experts all over the world, and there are people who have told me they're firmly convinced the jinn have an agenda to take back the planet. And their activities, many of their activities, point in that direction. But is it all the jinn or just part of the jinn? I think there are some jinn who are so inclined. There are others who just basically want to mess around with us like a cat worries a mouse.
Yeah.
And it's their entertainment, they get something off of it. They tend to be involved in generational curse activity as well. That if, for example, someone in the past dealt with them, it's very dangerous to summon the jinn and try and make deals with them. And if those go bad, it can create a curse energy that the jinn will follow through generations. They have the capability of tracking people through bloodlines, and because their existence is a lot longer than ours, generations are nothing to them. And so I won't get my payback from you, but I'll get it from your descendants.
I think one of the key things which you touched on is especially if they love, our life force energy. And I know it's easier said than done, but to just be fearless about the whole thing. And I think that comes with meditation and practice and knowing who you really are and your power and your connection to the divine. But I think share your thoughts on it, but to be fearless kind of takes all the power away from them. Is that?
It does, yes. And that's one of our biggest obstacles is overcoming fear. And, you have to admit that when you're startled by something that seems to be overpoweringly malevolent and evil, it's very hard to stifle that initial fear reaction. But when people are periodically and regularly attacked by these beings, there's a pattern to those experiences, and so you are able to have a counter defense. You can head them off at the pass. And it is very important to build up this spiritual connection, because that's a very powerful energy that literally disrupts their ability to come into your field of consciousness.
Okay, just so, because we're going to have to start wrapping up soon, and there's just so much information, but I would like you to speak a little bit on, now I heard that the jinn and the fairies were cast out from planet Earth, and, when I heard that, I was kind of like, well, why not us next? Because as human beings, as humanity, there's good and there's bad, but generally overall, I don't think we're doing a fabulous job here on planet Earth at the moment, if we look around us today. So, firstly, my question is, why wouldn't we be cast out next, considering the state of the world? And if you could answer that and kind of tie in also just generally your work and your teachings and learnings and so on, in how they can contribute to the conscious evolution of humanity to the brighter future, let's say. So could you speak on both of those, please?
There's evidence in the sacred texts and scriptures that there is something very special about humanity. And we have these creation stories where there were other beings on the planet before us who had dominion. And when we came along, that shifted to us, for better or for worse. So why did it? Well, for example, in the Bible, God creates man in his own image, humanity now, for a more general term. And so we are a reflection of the divine. And we find stories in the mystical traditions from Judaism that many of the angels were not pleased with this. And they considered human beings to be lower than them, and so they objected. And God didn't like that because of the favor that he had bestowed upon humanity. And so angels were obliterated until the angels agreed that this was a good thing. Angels also objected to the Book of All Secrets being passed down to Adam and the patriarchs, but this was wisdom that God decided to give human beings even despite our fall from grace. So we find similar things in other religious traditions as well, and related to the jinn in particular. The jinn were absorbed into Islam, and there's a lot of material about them in the Quran. And the creation story that's told there is that there were angels and jinn, and then God decided to make human beings and told the angels to bow down to the new creation. And the angels did so, the jinn refused. And so that's what caused them to be cast out of this dimension. So God hasn't explained exactly why we are so favored. But we seem to be. We seem to be, have been endowed with something significant. And I believe that this is a spiritualized consciousness that is meant to descend into the material world, to spiritualize this material world. And I don't think Earth is the only place like that. I think there are worlds that have far different spiritual energy on them. But this may be a way of developing soul consciousness to go through this process of the descent of spirit into physical matter in a way that these other beings, because of the way they were created and the vibration rate that they're at, were not able to do so.
I like the way you put that, so spiritualizing physical matter. So what does it look like from your understanding? Like how can your work, and you have such a wide range of work, how can it contribute to the conscious evolution of humanity? Like, what can we take from what you bring to the table and apply it and see it, how we can see it impact in the future?
The focus of my work has always been on our experiences, why we have them, how we have them, and more importantly, what do we do with it? Do we discard them? Do we integrate them? How do we integrate them, and how does that shift our worldview? So this is really about education and empowerment. And this involves all the fields that I've been in, because they're all interconnected in some way. The work that I do on the light side, the work I do on the dark side. It goes from the paranormal, and that includes ghosts and hauntings and mysterious creatures, into the ET connection, into the high spiritual, the angels, the mystical experiences, and the transformations of consciousness. We are always all around us, we are always presented with all of these opportunities to transform consciousness, small ways and big ways. And so my work explores all of that. And one of the things that I've been very grateful for is that the feedback I get from people is that I have helped to ground them, that I've been able to provide information that helps them understand their experiences, and some of them quite unsettling, in a way that they're comfortable with them, they accept them, and they can incorporate them. If we don't incorporate them into our worldview and who we are, we lose the transformative power of that. We have naysayers all over the place, from religion to medicine to science, saying it ain't so, it ain't real, it didn't happen, it's all in your head. And this is so disempowering. People have been having these experiences throughout history, so I want to put things into a context and say this is our heritage. We've been building on a spiritual heritage, and we are very much a part of that today. And because of technology, we have this global connection now that enables us to have mass consciousness. So how are we using this gift? And each one of us has a role to play. And with our own experiences, we don't have to be in a position to affect huge masses of people directly, but we can do so indirectly through what we contribute to the whole through our own experiences and awareness, the personal truth. And that's truth with a capital T.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. I would like for you to take a quick moment and just share your website, or where people can go to find out about like your wide array of books that you have, courses, workshops, just your schedule. So where can people look up technology? Let's use it for something good.
Yes,
what's your
absolutely.
website or websites that people can find out more about you and your work?
Well, my website is visionaryliving.com, and I have a library of articles on the website. My calendar is there on the homepage. I have a subscription for my monthly newsletter, which goes out free every month, and it has articles and items of interest in it. So that's the best place to find my work. I have books there available. My books are also available at Amazon and many other internet sites. I have another website too for the dark side experiences, and that's called djinnuniverse.com. And you can see how djinn is spelled here, D-J-I-N-N. So it's djinnuniverse.com. This is a forum for discussion. People all over the world have contributed their experiences with the djinn, which I think is quite educational for people learning about these things. So I have a very active schedule. I'm on the road quite a bit, traveling all over the country and internationally. So the best way to keep up with me is to go to visionaryliving.com.
So I will also be adding all the information in the text box below, so you will have that. Thank you so much, Rosemary. I truly appreciate the time and space that you shared with me today, and it's been very informative, very educational. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and found this dialogue useful. This is Expanding Consciousness with myself, your host, Anjula Ram. I'll see you next time.